All right. Cool. All right.
Hello,
Let's make
hello.
sure. Hello, everybody. Okay. Hold on.
I thought I had to be somewhere at one.
I want to be able to see the slide presentation, right? How did I do that last time? Let's see. Hold on. No, that's not it. Huh. Do you see the slide presentation?
I do not. I don't see it right now. If you may do the screen share, is that how we did it last time?
No, because I think it. Maybe, I don't know. Hold on, because last time I've done it, it was clicking on the little slide presentation button. Huh. Hang on. Let's see here. Hold on. Well, this problem. I don't know where it is because it was in here last. This is how I've done it last time. Let's see. Hold on. What does this do? Oh, maybe I can just upload it. I think I can do it. Hold on. Let's see if it'll let me do it.
We'll get this technical difficulties going here shortly. So bear with us. We'll get going.
Okay, here we go. Let's do that. Okay, hold on. I think I've got it. Maybe. Where'd it go? Well, that doesn't help. What happened? Okay, hang on. Now I just have to figure out how to download it. Once I figure that out, we should be good. All right, so now where are we? Okay. This is not helping me. Okay, here it is. Hold on. I found it. Okay, it's uploading. It says it might take 2 minutes, but it's doing it. Okay. Okay, it's going. Josh, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know you were muted. Okay.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay. Okay. Now what? I want to preview. Oh, okay, here we go. Hey, I did it. And I am like the least technical person on the planet. So this is impressive. Okay. Sorry for the 4-minute delay while we had issues, but thank you everybody for joining us again for our third and final installment of An Accountant and a Lawyer Walk into a Bar. I am the lawyer, and Josh is...
I'm the accountant.
Okay. So if you have joined us already for the first 2 installments, the first installment we talked about kind of brewery and planning stuff. The second one, we talked about growth and, changes. And in our final one, we're talking about exits and succession and changes. So obviously, while almost everybody, I think, is not starting a brewery with the end immediately in mind, all good things must and do come to an end. 100% of us will die one day. This is an absolute guarantee. I said this last time. It is best to start thinking through your long-term future of the business now. I know nobody wants to talk about their impending death or, have that, moral conversation with themselves. But, to think that you're going to do something forever is obviously not true. And we, most of us have families. Most of us have personal goals and dreams for our lives. And so we definitely want to be thinking about, is this what I want to be doing 10, 20, 30 plus years from now? So think some of the questions are, what will be your exit plan when you decide you don't want to do this anymore? And that happens. Some people, they just burn out from it. I've been running my business for almost 8 years. I do hope that I get to keel over at my desk. I think that would be great for me. But, that may not be what happens. Will you sell the business? Will you just shut it down? Do you have family that want to take it over? What if the business needs to be sold or broken up because there's conflicts with the people who are running it? Or there is a lawsuit or, God forbid, bankruptcy, or, there's just contentious issues. What happens if someone dies or is, injured in such a way that continuing the business is not feasible? So like I said, well, nobody ever wants to have this conversation. We need to have it. And this is basically the presentation where you're going to learn all those fun things. And I promise we're going to try to keep it exciting and lighthearted as much as we can. So without further ado, Josh, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing to add is it's something that you want to be considering now and you need to be considering now because you want to have the most agency in that decision making. If it's something that you kind of say, I'm always going to be running my brewery, or I'll figure out this out later, you may get in a situation where then your options are limited, or the way you can go about it's really limited, and you don't put yourself in the best position you can. And both Rachel and I, part of our job is to help you put your brewery in the best position that you can. And so by thinking about these things, even though you may have just started or you've been in operation for a few years, it's something about figuring out where you want to go and start having that kind of thought process. And then, as you grow your brewery, try to figure out a way to get towards that exit strategy. And that may change in 5-10 years, but it's something you want to kind of start planning for and shooting for at some point in time.
Yeah, and Josh, what you just said is so true. Do you want, the choice really is, do you want to be the person in the driver's seat controlling what's going to happen down the road, or do you want fate or some elements outside your control to tell you what that's going to be and limit your choices? So that's really what this is about, and honestly, like I said, most people who come into my office and want to have these conversations may have had some kind of direct experience with it. A lot of people come into my office because they had a very close friend or family member who went through a really horrible experience, and then they feel like, oh, I need to do this. Or you're going on a cruise or you're going overseas. Those are the other two times people come to see me about such things. So, we need to, but those shouldn't be the only things, because even though, I'm 34 years old, that doesn't mean that tomorrow I can't, something can't happen to me. And so we want to have those conversations now.
Yep. So
this slide is really great. This has been in the slide deck, from the beginning, but, we did it. Let's get out of here. It's pretty awesome for this particular presentation. So here's what we're really going to talk about today. So we've got, 3 areas. Resource is really one slide, but we're going to talk about amicable conclusion of the business. So dissolution, meaning we've decided, we've made a conscious, well thought out choice that we're ready to move on to something else. A third party approaches us to purchase the brewery, or the partners again decide that they want to split up amicably. Not amicable are the scary things. So bankruptcy, we'll get into the very basic stuff about that. Dissolution, business is not profitable and we have to shut it down, but we're not in bankruptcy land. And probably the worst, well, not the worst, I think bankruptcy is the worst, partners contentiously split. And then finally, succession. ESOPs, which is employer, well, actually, I don't even know what the acronym is. Josh, what's the acronym exactly?
Employee Stock Ownership Program.
Okay, that's what it is, yeah. Family member succession, so a family member's taking over the business, and then we'll kind of give a one slider about estate planning. I promise it's not going to be crazy. And we'll talk about some resources as well that if you are interested in some more stuff about this. Okay. All right, so on the amicable side, we've got a couple things here. So we've got your amicable, we basically talked about this just before. So, deciding to dissolve, meaning, we've got, you're just burned out or you are ready to move on to something else. Selling to a buyer, we've got two, not typos, actual real world sales to same player, different times. Goose Island was first, Wicked Weed second, but both to AD InBev, and Parters splitting up nicely. So amicable split. The business shuts down. You decide to do that. What the reasons are for that can vary. Again, a lot of it is burnout, just wanting to move on to a different type of thing. There are many entrepreneurs out there that are what we call serial entrepreneurs. They start something, they do it for a couple of years, and then they really enjoy the startup phase and they want to keep doing that. So that's not necessarily as rampant in what I call breweries, or what I would call a lifestyle business. A lot of people start them and they're planning to do that one business for the rest of their lives, or, whatever. So, let's just talk about how does one even do that? Let's just kind of unpack that a little bit. So the legal dissolution process, first of all, if you have multiple owners, the first thing you're going to want to do is check your operating agreement, your bylaws, partnership agreement, whatever that is, about what that document says about how you're supposed to dissolve and wind up the business. If you don't have that document, shame, you didn't watch the first episode and we missed something. So we got to go back and do that. If you didn't, then most likely your state provides you the mechanism to what we call wind up, dissolve, and terminate the business. And the procedure, while it varies from state to state, follows pretty much this pattern. First thing is the assets are liquidated. So all the stuff is gathered and the partners, they sell everything off. You got a pile of money after that. So you snap your fingers and your fermenters and all of that stuff, just turn into money. Yay. So the first thing that happens is external creditors are paid first. So if you have credit cards, if you have loans, if you have any of that stuff, those people are paid first. If you have internal creditors, so if one of the owners gave a personal loan to the business, then they are paid second. Anything else is distributed to the owners based on their ownership interest, which is laid out in those bylaws of that operating agreement. Then you've got to file all your paperwork with your state. So just to kind of give you an idea of how it works here in Tennessee, we have dissolution and termination paperwork. They're actually two separate things. They're not that expensive. So we have to file, in order to file those, that's actually the last piece. We've got to make sure all taxes are paid and all tax accounts are closed. Those are two separate things. You could pay your taxes and forget to close them. That happens a lot, and it's silly, but it happens. Once everything is paid and everything is closed, then we can file dissolution and termination. So what happens if you don't do that? Then guess what? Your taxes are just going to keep on piling up until eventually revenue might come after you. So Josh, do you want to give a little bit more in depth about the liquidation process and stuff like that?
Yeah, when you get to this point, one, you got to make sure you have a solid balance sheet in place. So you do know, okay, what are my assets? What are my liabilities? Understand what all those are. It is going to be the loans and the things that you think of. It's also going to be the bills you may not have paid.
Josh, you froze.
Froze? Oh.
Gosh, we're having many technical difficulties today.
Can you hear me still? Hello. Let's see.
hold on. And now I can't hear him. Well, that's not good.
Hello, am I back?
Oh, yes, yeah, I hear you now. Okay. Oh,
So,
goodness.
We'll go. We'll get through this here together, guys.
Yeah, we really will.
So basically, you have to have that balance sheet in place. You have to know where your assets are. You have to know where all your liabilities are. It's more than just your loans. It's going to be any bills you haven't paid. It's people who you owe money to that are going to want the piece of your assets when you do liquidate them. Make sure you have a good list of that. Understand all of your debts and liabilities you have out there. Some of you should have been doing.
You want to talk about secured versus unsecured?
Yeah. Secured debt are going to be things that are going to be, and this is really going to be like your loans, your equipment, things that are collateralized by your assets, right? So if I am shutting down and I have the secured loan that's collateralized by my fermenters, when I sell my fermenters, I need to use those funds to particularly pay that loan. If I, whereas like an unsecured loan is like a credit card where it's not tied or secured by a particular assets. So when we go through the liquidation process, first we got to pay all those secured creditors out first because they have rights to the assets. They were collateralized by the assets that you have. They get the first piece of the pie, and then when we're done with that, then we go to our unsecured creditors, and this is going to be your credit card companies or people with bills or things that you owe money to, assuming that you haven't guaranteed them in some other way. You're going to pay those things off secondly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you are not sure if you have secured debt on the business, here in Tennessee, through our Secretary of State, you can go to check to see if a UCC-1 has been filed. And so you can do a search on your business to check to see if any of these financing statements are floating around out there. So, when you sell a business, generally, you're going to want to know if there are any liens or these financing statements sitting around out there, because if someone's going to buy the business, they're not going to do it unless you can provide clean title to it, which means that you've cleared all the debts off of it. So just keep that in mind. You really want to have a good accounting of what your secured and unsecured debt is. And to make sure, because you're like Josh said, your secured creditors are in first position and your unsecured are in second position.
And it's also too with the taxes, that you do, once you kind of liquidate all this and pay this stuff out, they make sure you have paid all your taxes. The IRS or your state agency will still come after you. They want their money, and just saying you're closed for business does not eradicate you from the tax man. So
no.
Make sure those are all paid, and then those are all shut down. Because if you don't, then you get late filing penalty notices and things that you didn't file your 941, your 1040, your 1120S, or whatever that is, and you're still have to do that. So make sure when you do this, pay it all out, shut it down, say it's your final return, and then you don't have that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, Josh, do you want to talk through some of these kind of real world studies?
Yeah. So, another positive way to go out is to sell your business to someone else. We give the first examples here, Goose Island and Wicked Weed. Goose Island, obviously, was kind of the first big one that was purchased by Anheuser-Busch. And that situation, that was kind of even a situation where, while the brewery had no problem with selling, they were kind of out of options at that point. We talked about this last time in our last webinar that, Goose had kind of grown to the size that for them to continue to grow, they needed to have a significant cash infusion or a significant way for them to produce that beer. And there were at that point really limited resources to do that. And basically really came down to either Anheuser-Busch or Miller Coors being the ones to come in and basically buy them in order to continue that growth. Wicked Weed was an example of, more amicable of like, hey, we want to sell. This is what's good for us. This is how we want to, we've thought this through. There's this plan. We've executed it. This makes the most sense for us, our families, for everyone involved. So there, in that case, was a little bit more options, and there was a little bit more forethought in that process. So that's going to be an option that's available, or it doesn't have to be an acquisition by Anheuser-Busch, it can be an acquisition by a peer. And so recently, this is literally 2 weeks ago, Right Brain Brewing in Michigan was acquired by Roke Brewing in Michigan, and so in that situation, Roke bought the Right Brain Brewing Company, bought the equity of the company from the previous owners, and now is going to operate that brewery in addition to their own brewery, right? So I think we're going to see a little bit more of that here in the future.
Oh, yeah. I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
A more common way to sell or go out there, because the Anheuser-Busch's of the world and Miller Coors aren't necessarily making those big purchases like they were in the past. So we will see a lot more of this type of operation where it's going to be a sell to a similar peer or even a merge with that peer. And we've combined our two breweries now together and operating going forward there too. So, we'll see a lot more of these kind of peer acquisitions here in the future.
So I actually was doing a little digging before to get ready for today. And so Goose Island was acquired by AB InBev in 2011 for $38.8 million. And this was basically AB InBev's test acquisition into craft. And this is where they created their the high end, which is their craft division. So Goose Island was their test run. So then fast forward for the Wicked Weed acquisition, I found a really interesting article by one of the former owners of Wicked Weed who knows nothing about what the conversation was like in the room, but he wrote like a piece about what he speculated to be the reasons they did this. And I actually found his insights I would say they're probably what went on in that. So why did they sell? So they really talked about three areas. So one of the other ones they mentioned was, money is obviously the biggest thing. Ballast Point sold for $1 billion when they were valued at $100 million. I mean, that's ridiculous. Obviously, if Anheuser-Busch is saying, you get a valuation and you're valued at $100 million, and Anheuser-Busch is saying, we're going to pay you $1 billion. I don't know about you, but that's really hard to say no to. And I guess the question is, why can't we find actual numbers about this? This is a private sale. This was not a public thing. This is confidential. I guarantee you it's wrapped up in confidentiality for the rest of time. The other reason was, as we said, maybe it was time for them to move on to something else. Now, we know that the owners of Wicked Weed are still involved with the business, so I don't think that was the case. But I think really probably what happened was, unfortunate truth about the beer industry is that it is almost impossible to grow past a certain size. Eventually you need a major player if you want to go national, like any of these brands, Goose Island, Highland, Ballast Point, Blue Point, any of these ones that have been acquired by AB InBev. If you want to go there, if you want to be everywhere in the continental U.S. and abroad, you're going to have to get acquired by one of these guys. If that is your dream, it's very difficult to do it on your own.
The Lagunitas and the Belgiums of the world, those kind of larger breweries, those are going to be harder to come by to get to that size in this current climate. And so,
yes,
it is. You're going to be more rare to see those, continue to be versus these kind of sales like Goose Island with weed.
So briefly, just what are the different ways? There are really two different types of selling of the business. Mm-hmm. There is a stock purchase of the business where you basically say you take the business and you plop, somebody else takes it from you. That is the assets, any debt, the name, the actual company itself. So it's like the house and all the stuff in it. An asset purchase agreement is you're just selling off the assets, and you can decide how that's going to go. You could just sell the fermenters and the canning line or whatever, and you could just sell the name or the brands, and you could but you're not selling the actual corporate house that it lives in. So those are the different ways, the different getting down to brass tacks that you can actually sell a business. And they have different tax implications and different, how that sale is done can have tax implications for the person who purchases, for the person who, gets, capital gains tax, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, it's, when you do a stock sale, I mean, you're selling the equity of the company. So if I own if I own all the shares of this company and someone else wants to buy it, I'm giving them my shares. I have a basis in that value of the company, and then the excess of what I get from what I basically put in is going to be a capital gains tax. And an asset sale, we got to kind of value the assets, value the liabilities, figure out what's being taken and what's not being taken, because they may buy certain things, they may not. They may say, I'm just going to buy the assets, I may not take the brand, or there's going to be this kind of division. So there's going to be some sort of valuation of the assets and the things that are going to be sold. Those things are going to have a basis that exists in there, and the excess on that basis is going to flow through as capital gains potentially. And then you also have to, whatever else was in there that you end up liquidating out or getting rid of or whatever, contributes to that as well.
Yes, so to keep all of that stuff in mind. All right, cool. Okay, partners split nicely. Scenarios: one owner wants to buy out the other. Sale of the whole brewery when all partners want out. Things to consider: the contract between the owners should lay out the procedure for selling, for buying out or selling to a third party or to an internal owner. So most of the time, there is this right of first refusal language in your governing document, which means that, so say we have 2, 3, or however many owners, we have more than one, okay? What happens is, if I, owner 1, decide I would like to sell all of my interests and move to Colombia, that actually has happened. I have a client who sold every single thing he owned in the U.S. and is in Colombia right now. He's not a brewer owner. He's very upset with our system of government, basically. That's another story. But basically what would happen is I then have to, pursuant to the contract, offer my interest to the other owners to purchase for a set period of time at a set rate, and how that is determined usually is stipulated in the agreement. And those people have the right of first refusal, meaning they have the right to decide to purchase it or not. So if they choose to purchase it, then we go through the whole procedure of purchasing that interest. If they choose not to, then that person can try to sell it to a third party. It is very difficult because this is what we would call a closed corporation, meaning really the only people interested in buying it are the people who run it. Because if you try to sell it to somebody outside, those internal owners still have the right to, accept or reject that person. And you may only be, selling the financial rights, things like that. So, but the valuation process, which Josh will talk a little bit more about, is usually built into this, because we've got to figure out what the thing is worth and what your interest is worth in order to offer to sell it to your other owners.
Yeah. And when we look at the valuation, there's a number of ways we can go about doing it. We first want to look to see if there's anything that was stipulated in our legal agreements on how we, there's a agreed upon way we're going to go about doing this. Otherwise, we're going to go through a formal valuation process that usually looks at 3 different things. We're going to look at the market value of it. So, in that situation, we're going to look at, okay, are other breweries sold? What prices have they sold for? As a comparison, and we'll make adjustments based on that. We may do some on a revenue-based approach, so a percent of revenue, or multiple on revenue, or multiple on net income. Maybe a route we end up taking there. We can do some sort of cash flow modeling as well, using discount cash flows to understand our value. And also we can go and just look at our assets and say, okay, what are our assets? What's the actual physical cost here? Is there any premium that I would get when I would sell this this business or assets, and what would that come out to? And so we'll look at all of those pieces of information together. Typically you're going to have a formal valuation done by someone who's certified in providing these valuations, and they'll come up to some sort of value based on this, and some of them may be weighted on one of these methods more so than the other, but that valuation will kind of sit as okay, here's what we're going to value our company at, and this is how, in a situation here where one partner is buying out the other, we can then put a value on that ownership of that partner, and then that other partner or partners can decide if they want to buy that piece or not.
Excellent. Okay, let's get into the juicy stuff, which is not amicable. All right, so the first one's kind of the scary one. The second one's more of the juicy one, okay? So everybody just kind of like the word bankruptcy, it should cause, absolute fear to just run through you. So I'm going to put a massive caveat. I do not practice bankruptcy law. I know enough about bankruptcy to tell you that there are chapters and to refer it to a person who does it. So if things are getting to a point where you think this is a possibility, I cannot stress enough, you must hire a bankruptcy lawyer. Your dad's cousin's brother's lawyer who does personal injury, not going to work. Bankruptcy lawyer, okay? This is a very specialized area of law, okay? So here's the thing with bankruptcy. I'm going to prime. Bankruptcy, everybody throws around that they're going to file bankruptcy like on a constant basis. Bankruptcy, first of all, not everybody qualifies for bankruptcy. I've learned this from talking with my colleagues that do bankruptcy law on a regular basis. Most people actually don't qualify for it. And frankly, you seem to think, oh, I'll file for bankruptcy. Trump's filed for bankruptcy like a million times at this point. It is devastating. It's devastating personally, and it eviscerates a business. It almost makes it cease to exist, depending on which chapter you file. And the fact is, I know I put this last, but it is a last resort. Okay, it is. You have you've uncovered every stone. There is literally no other option but to do this. And understand, it takes a very long time to recover. Okay, so for small businesses that are incorporated, because I am so hoping that no one listening to this is doing a brewery that is not incorporated, because then you really haven't listened to us. The options we have are Chapter 7 and Chapter 11. So I don't know why it says 7 and 11 here, but so Chapter 7 is the first bullet right there. Chapter 7, LLCs and corporations do not receive a discharge. So everybody, when people hear bankruptcy, they're like, oh, I'll just file for a bankruptcy and it'll wipe all my debt clean. That isn't how it works all the time. Actually, it's quite, in order to get a full discharge, wiping away all your debt, it's going to be pretty bad, okay? So it doesn't fully discharge all of the debt. It will shut your company down. It will shut it down. The bankruptcy trustee will take control. They will liquidate all the assets and distribute what is left to creditors. What can happen is this can open the door to piercing the corporate veil claims. So alter ego claims, commingling funds claims. So if you did anything bad with this company, if you didn't do your corporate requirements, if you treated this business as your personal piggy bank, you're going to find yourself personally on the hook for this. So you're not going to file Chapter 7 unless you have talked to a bankruptcy attorney who has advised you that this is the only way to go, okay? Chapter 11 allows for the company to restructure and to continue operating. It is also quite risky, expensive, and very time-consuming. I can tell you I've talked to people who have filed bankruptcy. Once they come out from beyond the bankruptcy, they realize that it was the last resort, that there was no other option in order for them to basically keep a roof over their heads personally. And it is, they never, ever, ever want to do it again, ever. Okay. So again, don't just throw it around like you're going to do it until you've actually talked to a person who can tell you whether even you qualify to file bankruptcy. Okay. Judicial dissolution. Okay. Our owners, they fighting. They are just not getting along. This is what I'll tell you. I've been doing this a long time and I wrote a book about it. Okay. Which was in the end of the presentation. Okay. What ends up happening is everything's going along great. Everybody's doing really well for the first couple months, the honeymoon phase, if you will. And then we start fighting about stupid stuff. And then we start fighting about bigger stuff. And then somebody does something stupid. And we end up in what we call deadlock situation. And I can tell you, which is very odd, the thing that ends up breaking the camel's back is usually, the straw that breaks the camel's back is usually something so minor. It's, this person took my microwave and that's the end. It's usually over something stupid like an actual thing. Sewing machines, microwaves, yeah, these things have been, seriously, I've done this a long time, that it's a physical possession that is the breaking point, okay? So what is considered a deadlock? So again, that is usually laid out in statute or it's laid out in your corporate documents. But basically the business can't be conducted because the two parties, the people who run the thing, cannot freaking talk to each other. They can't even be in the same room with each other. Okay. If a deadlock persists for a certain period of time, usually about 30 days, one of the owner has to file a lawsuit. Basically, you're suing your business partners and asking the court to dissolve the company because the two of you cannot agree on how to manage the business. Basically, you're getting divorced. You're asking the court to split this business up and for the business to pay, or one of the other, for the business to pay the owners X, Y, and Z. This is extremely expensive. If you literally can't realize that you shouldn't be in business anymore, and you got to go have a judge tell you that you can't be in business anymore and pay lawyers and court costs to do this, yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Josh, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't. I would only say that if you start to feel like, you're having issues with your other partners, get counsel, talk to other people, get other people involved, and kind of mediate the situation before you get to this point, because this is a mess, and you don't want to get to this point. And to the extent you can figure out ways to make it better, or going back to one of your partners buying out the other, or figuring out something that makes sense for everyone involved without doing this, then that's what you want to do.
And here's what I can tell you. The reason why it comes down to having to go to court for something like this is kind of like bankruptcy. It is the last resort. We've tried everything, and this is the last resort. Again, everybody likes to throw, I'm going to sue you. Well, most people don't know what that means, and they have no concept of how expensive that gets. Not a single bit. I have a very learned colleague of mine who likes to think that because TV shows, based like Law and Order, show you like crime, like initiate lawsuit and verdict in an hour, that people seem to have this warped reality that these things happen like tomorrow. Most lawsuits have an average time frame of about a year to 2 years, and business litigation is extremely complex and can take even longer than that. And if you think for one instant that your other partner is not going to try to bleed you dry based on legal fees, you got another thing coming. They will. And a lot of lawsuits stop because the parties don't have enough money to afford to continue it. It's ridiculous. But here's the reason why it gets to this point. Because you didn't listen to us in the beginning, and you did not take the time to get the right documents in place, and you didn't talk about this stuff before you were fighting. I am about to draft a complaint about this very thing, because I've got two owners that didn't do any of this stuff ahead of time. They have no agreement between them. And I've got my client who is wanting, $250,000 for his share. And I have the other side saying, oh, we'll just forgive $100,000 of debt for you. Yeah, we're kind of on totally different solar systems at this point. So we're going to have to go to court. It's really a last resort. We don't really have any other choice at this point. And it's unfortunate, because if they'd had a freaking, contract between them in the beginning, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We would say, what does the document say? How do we get out? Okay, let's do that. So it can really head off this extremely expensive thing. I can tell you, I've also talked to people who have been through litigation like this, and they have also said, I am never, ever, ever doing it again. So if you think that these are quick fixes to things, bankruptcy and filing a lawsuit, oh my goodness, no, just no.
And I think that gets to your point as well. When you first start a business with your partners, whether it's friends of yours, family members, whatever, like that's like when everyone's happy about it, everyone's super excited, and you don't think like what happens if this goes south, and like let's put at least the paperwork and the legal documents in place that dictate this and help us work through those things when we're at each other's throat and we hate each other and we don't want to do this anymore, right? So many companies, when they start, they don't think about this, like, oh, we're best friends forever and we'll always do this, and then things happen and things will change. And so think about what happens, if things were to go south, do they have the right documents in place from a legal perspective? Have you talked about those things? Because that helps head off these situations here at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about succession, which is our last area. So we're going to talk about ESOPs, which is the employees owning interest in the business, selling or leaving the business to a family member or having a family member succeed you in the business, and then we'll talk about estate planning as well. So Josh is going to cover ESOPs because he knows way more about that than I do.
Yeah. So basically in an ESOP situation, we've made the decision as the ownership that we want to continue this business and keep it independent for a long period of time. And so one of the mechanisms we can go about doing this ESOP, which is a employee stock option or stock ownership plan, which basically is a way for your employees to own the shares of the company through this particular vehicle. It's a separate plan vehicle. It's not your employees owning direct ownership in the company. It's owned through this vehicle. But it's a way that if your employees now own the company and there are mechanisms for new employees to get in and employees are leaving to get out, now this business can continue on in existence without having an outside investor or someone have to acquire it to continue it on when you're gone. And so I'm actually working on this with one client right now, where the owner has been in business, he's older, wants to get out, but wants to continue this business, as exists with the management team and the employees that he has, and doing an ESOP is a way for him to do it, because he then can basically sell his shares out through to this ESOP. The ESOP acquires it, then the employees inside will acquire those shares through a period of time or through different mechanisms inside the ESOP, and they will basically allow this business to continue on without the owner being there anymore. This also has great benefits for the owner itself because he can sell shares through to the ESOP on a tax-free basis. So there's some really good tax planning strategies by doing this method. And the biggest example where this exists right now is New Belgium Brewery. That's something that the owners had kind of this ethos at the beginning of, like, hey, we want our employees to be a part of this. We don't want to sell out to the man. We want to own this and continue this on beyond us, right? Once we're done with the brewery, we want to see the New Belgium continue to exist and then continue to thrive and flourish. And so they created an ESOP plan. Employees, there's mechanisms of how the employees will earn or buy in shares to the company. And I've talked to a few employees there who have this, and it gives them great pride in their work that says, not only am I working to get a paycheck, like I am an owner of this company, like what I do matters, and it builds a lot of goodwill with employees, and they kind of take more of an ownership in the company as a result because they are owners, and they do get the benefit from how the business operates.
Absolutely. And, my mother, who has been a business owner for years, she has always said to me, no one is going to care more about your business than you do. And that is such a true statement. And so what you're doing is you're giving your employees that sense of ownership. So, if you already had kind of awesome yet, employees, you give them ownership and watch them kick it into high gear. If you are, how you feel like there's a fire under your ass, I mean, this is just going to cause that to happen because they are now owners, and they care about the direction of the brewery and they care about, the decisions that are made. So, I mean, I think an ESOP program is a phenomenal way to go from a succession perspective, for sure. And there's definitely, getting kind of in the weeds with that, there's definitely certain documents in place that you want to have and make sure they're drawn up by an attorney to, make sure that that's all, done properly and nice and clean. So that's definitely, it's definitely a very awesome idea to look at succession and legacy. Family member succession. So our two examples for this, Sierra Nevada and Highland Brewing Company. So Sierra Nevada, Ken Grossman in 2007, he felt pretty burnt out, and I think he had been, kicking around getting the brewery ready for acquisition. When he was shocked when his three children came to him and they said they wanted to keep the brewery in the family. So you have his oldest daughter, Sierra, which I think is awesome. She runs one side of the business out in West Berkeley, and I think the youngest son was overseeing the construction of the East Coast sector of the brewery. And And that's where the children came to him and said, this is what I want to do. I don't think, when I was reading articles about this, that he was looking to build a brewery that he's going to, give to his children someday. But, I think they surprised him. They said, hey, we really want to do this. And that's, I think that's any parent's dream, to have the children really want to be involved in the business like that. Highland Brewing Company, which is in Asheville, North Carolina, was founded by Oscar Wong, and is currently owned and operated by his daughter. They just went through a corporate rebrand. I actually got to see her speak. She came to Southern Brewers Conference a few years ago. She's very impressive. And I think that her father, she told the story of kind of where everything came from. He was an immigrant, and he started this brewery, and I think this was always his idea, is he wanted this to be a legacy for his family. And thankfully that's what's happened for him. Obviously you can't control what your kids are going to want to do or not do. I have a 1-year-old. Do I think he's going to be a lawyer? I have no clue. Will he step into the shoes? Will Schaefer Law Firm continue? I don't know. Is that something that's super important to me? Nah, not really. So if it dies with me, that's fine. But, it's something to think about. If this is something your family is already involved with, this might be something to start. How do you decide if this is what you want to do? Well, depending on how old your children or other family members are, start involving them in the business. But, you want to, in my personal opinion, you want to start those kids at keg washers. Start them as keg washers. Make them, I am a huge proponent of the value of a good hard day's work. So start them at the lowest level and make them work their way up just like any other employee would. Because they have to understand that just because they're the daughter or son of the owner doesn't mean that, they are some privileged little child. Get them, and I think there's something to be said about them learning all the different ins and outs of the business, from washing the kegs to, mashing into, running the books. They have to learn all aspects of this for you to feel comfortable. If something happened to you tomorrow, what would they need to know? What do you want them to know in order to be able to pass this business on?
Yeah. I think those are two great examples there. Another example that came to mind is Bell's Brewery in Michigan. And that one's a little interesting in that Larry Bell, who founded Bell's Brewery, his daughter kind of took over the, president and, of the company, and recently left that. The Bell family still owns it, but, she kind of ran in and wanted to kind of get out and kind of spread her wings and go elsewhere. And so, it has to be something your children want to do and want to continue on. And maybe it's, given the opportunity to at least give that a try while you still are running or have the ability to run the organization. And if it's not something they want to do, at least then that and you can make other plans at that time.
Yeah. All right. And finally, the most exciting subject of all, estate planning. Like I said, we're all going to die someday. Super awesome. Serious bodily injury is actually very common and very possible. So I'm 34. And the chances of me dying, statistically, I'm a very good health, all that kind of stuff, are not as high as me having a catastrophic accident, okay? And so, to be honest with you, that is something depending on the type of client that I meet with, I'm more concerned about the documents of the, as I like to call it, you're with us, but you're not with us scenario. Meaning you are still medically alive, but you have no ability to make your own decisions. And that is that limbo place that most of the documents we're going to talk about really deal with, okay? So when do you need to be thinking about this? Okay, so the right answer is the moment you turn 18, okay? But nobody ever does, okay? So I have told people that there are 3 major life events that really warrant needing to come and talk to an estate attorney. You start a business, you have a kid, or you buy a house. If you're listening to this podcast, this webinar, and you own this brewery, you already have number 1. If you have the other 2, you've hit the trifecta. Yay, we need to be doing this, okay? So let's talk about the type of documents that you really need to have in place, okay? So the will. The will is, where does your stuff go? Where do you want your crap to go? So your physical assets, So your house, your jewelry, your guns. Trust me, I'm in Tennessee. The gun thing is a big deal. And your business. You know, who is getting the business? So your will, what it says in your will is going to work very, very nicely with our corporate documents, okay? So it needs to say who's going to step into that role, who's going to take over the financial interest in the business. And so what ends up happening is the way that I do this is I say in the will document, see operating agreement for how this is going to work, okay? One of the assets of your estate is going to be your interest in the business. So your operating agreement then is going to say, hey, I own this brewery. If something happens to me, my husband is my heir. He is my beneficiary. But my business owners, my partners are not wanting to, as I like to say, do business with the wives or the husbands, depending on your situation. The beneficiary of the estate would then have to go through a buyout by the other members. Those members are going to have to buy that person's interest. They don't have any voting rights, and you're going to have to, it's immediately going to trigger needing to buy their interest out. So there's lots of other components to a will, depending on your estate. We're just talking very, very broad strokes. So you definitely want to talk to an estate planning attorney about these kinds of things. The next two documents, advanced care plan or a living will, depending on your jurisdiction. And I put Terry Schiavo because if everyone remembers the very, very tragic incident with Terry Schiavo is she was very young. She got in a very catastrophic accident. And her husband and her mother had a massive fight about what her wishes would have been. She was determined by medical professionals that she was in a permanent coma. She was not going to wake up. The husband, I think, wanted to turn off life support, and the parents they did not want to do that. And so they fought about it. So because no one knew what she wanted, she was kept alive for a very long time. I don't actually remember the disposition of it, if she ended up being taken off life support. But basically, after that scenario, most states adopted statutory forms to help prevent that from happening. So we have one in Tennessee. It's called Advanced Care Plan. They are typically called living wills in other jurisdictions. This is a really, really important document. You have to sit down with your loved ones and say, hey, pull the plug, or hey, keep me alive forever. You need to have those conversations with people, and you need to have it in a document, and you need to tell them where it lives, okay? Powers of attorney. The biggest one is powers of attorney for finances. When you are not able to handle your finances, who is going to be able to do that without a piece of paper that says, if something happens to me, a medical professional says that I cannot make my financial decisions, that automatically means this person that I have named is able to do that. That's extremely important if you're running a business, because if you are the only person in the business who has that power, how are you going to pay all your employees or continue the business to operate, especially if you're able to come out of that particular, situation? So those are really important. Trust documents, I'll talk about briefly, are really, depending on the type of estate you have. I build trusts into my will documents if we have minor children, because we don't want children to go crazy with money. So the story that I tell people is that I'm an only child. My mother has basically come from nothing and built a very sizable estate herself. When I turned 18, I was supposed to take everything under the will if both of them were to die. Well, I turned 18 and my parents didn't walk to their estate planning attorney and said, no, she's going to blow it all. And so they changed it. So you want to have a mechanism in place for someone else to manage that money if something were to happen to you. Because most 18-year-olds are going to blow it unless they have an older relative who's going to help them manage that money for them. A lot of people ask me what kinds of things fall outside of probate. Anything co-titled assets. So if the house is co-titled in the name of a living person, if bank accounts are co-titled, they will pass outside of probate. Life insurance policies, 401ks and things like that will pass outside of probate. The goal is not to avoid probate, people, okay? It's not. It can actually be a relatively painless process if you have this stuff in place. We don't want to die intestate. Intestate means we have died without a will. And that means that you did not decide where things are going to go, and you've left a mess for your loved ones, and let's not do that, okay? Finally, we'll talk about certain types of insurance that I believe that a business really should have. And these are things that you have to actively seek out because you run the business. Short-term disability. If something happens to you and, in the short term, this could pay part of your salary until that disability is alleviated. Long-term disability takes over if short-term disability is not long enough. The last two life insurance policies, key man life insurance. If you have owners, multiple owners, you want to take policies out on your other owners, because if one of them dies, so say one of your owners is your head brewer. If he dies, you would have a life insurance policy that can pay the salary to put somebody else in that place. And finally, buy-sell life insurance is basically a life insurance policy if you have to sell the business if one of the owners dies, okay? I believe that there is no such thing as too much insurance. I have a financial planner who I think just comes and sits down and tells me all about the new insurance products there are, and I get them. I don't get everything, but I get a lot of things, okay? Generally, for just a general life insurance policy, you want term life insurance, and you want a policy that is about 10 times your annual income. Life insurance is to give money to someone who depends on your income. So find a financial advisor or planner that can help you get this stuff in place. Josh, do you have anything to add on the tax implications of any of this stuff?
No, not. I mean, the one thing to note, if you do get insurance proceeds to life insurance proceeds to you, that is not taxed. That it comes to you tax free. And a lot of people have heard about the state tax. State tax doesn't kick in until you meet the certain threshold, and that is a very large sum of money. So. It's not like if you get, you're passing down $100,000 to some of your kids, the state tax will kick in on that because you have a large estate tax exemption before you get over that and have to pay estate taxes. If you do have a trust in place, that will require a trust tax return to be filed, and basically things get reported there. Also, if you do then. If you do then pass, then there's also kind of a state return that gets filed as well. So, if you do have people in place, a trustee or other financial people you designate in place, make sure that they know those things need to happen and talk to the right professionals. Make sure that does happen.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to shamelessly plug. I am a huge Dave Ramsey fan. He's in the Nashville area. If you need a place to really understand some of these insurance, things like really, really clearly, he probably explains them better than anybody I know. So, he has a very conservative financial approach. So it's not everybody's cup of tea. I love it. And my husband and I subscribe to the no debt approach ourselves. As much as we can, we're in the process of getting out right now. But I think if you really want to understand insurance and what kinds you need, he's got a great bunch of resources on his website for that. And finally, I'm shamelessly going to plug my book again. So if you want to know about real world scenarios of how a business marriage compares to a real marriage, my book will walk you through every single phase of that. And if you really want to take the time, and which you should, and to get your business arrangement set up properly between you and your partners, my book, which is meant to be read in 2 hours, it also has exercises in it, is going to be a really great place to start for that kind of stuff. It doesn't replace hiring an attorney for getting these documents in place, but it is going to walk you through and give you a 10,000-foot view of what the process should look like to do it. So if you want, the link to go buy my book on Amazon is right there. So that's all, and we are like at 59:23. That's pretty good.
Perfect. Yeah.
So thank you if you have been with us since the first episode. Thank you. We would love your feedback about this particular one as well as the others, and we so appreciate you hanging with us through all three of these. So, God, it feels like it was just yesterday that we were talking about doing this. Now it's over.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah.
So thank you all. If you have any questions, you can reach out to either one of us directly. And we are so happy to be even allowed to sit on the periphery of this wonderful, wonderful craft beer industry. I can say that for sure for us.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thanks, guys. So have a great rest of the day.
See y'all.